keep on trying. I'm about that life, never quit. I'm about that life, keep on striving. I'm about that life, keep on pressing. I'm about that life, keep on shining. I'm about that life, keep on dreaming. I'm about that life, never stop. I'm about that life. I'm about that life. I'm about that life. You know, they say I'm dreaming. Yes, I'm dreaming. So what? I don't care. She's about that life. I'm about that life. It's a dream thing, y'all.
Today on About That Life, I sit down and talk to an incredible performer and entertainer. As a graduate of the Pace School of Performing Arts in New York City, she received her BFA in commercial dance and would go on to build quite the impressive resume. She joined the Radio City Rockettes in the 2014 Radio City Christmas Spectacular on tour. She starred in the first national tour of Bullets Over Broadway, and she performed with Norwegian Cruise Lines. She has starred in many shows such as The Little Mermaid, Cats, The Sound of Music, working with major theater companies such as Tuacahn Center for the Arts and Paper Mill Playhouse. Here is Kelly Peterson. All right, Kelly.
Hello. Thank you so
Hi.
much for having me. I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
get to chat.
Yes, thank you so much for doing this. I'm just so excited to see you. I know it's been several years, like 5 years since I physically have seen you. And I'm thankful that we've kept in contact with each other. But I love to start the show off by explaining how I know my guests and why they're so special to me. And you are very, very special to me. You are a very important part of a major, I would say, accomplishment in my career, and that was working at Tuacahn in 2019. We were roommates. I'm gonna let you take it from there, how we know each other a little bit more in depth.
Yes, sure. Yeah. So, for all the listeners, Taj was a wonderful roomie, so kind, and made the time away from home so enjoyable and pleasant. And yeah, so Taj and I had the opportunity of working together in Ivins, Utah, at the Tuacahn Center for the Arts. We performed in three major production shows together: The Little Mermaid, Disney's When You Wish, and The Sound of Music.
Yes.
Yes, and what a journey that was. We were away from home for many months, from our dear loved ones and family and friends. But during the month together, the experiences we had were incredible. Like, the opportunity to perform like in the rocks under the stars was just unimaginable. And when I say like dancing in the rocks and under the stars, I literally mean that. As specifically for the show When You Wish, my starting position for the opening number was about a quarter-mile hike away from the stage into the rocks. And I felt like the coolest person to get to dance full on and sing, on a real rock. And, as an audience member, I probably looked like a little pebble because that's how far away I was, from the stage. But, who can say they did that, right? And so for any listeners or members of our cast that year in Tuacahn, this was the Pocahontas opening number where we were all chanting, "Hey, hey, hey." And again, I took every, opportunity to relish in that moment because it was incredible. And yeah, so we did Little Mermaid, and as a member of the cast of Little Mermaid, I was in the ensemble, and I also served as the aerial double. So it was super thrilling to be a part of the Disney magic and also be a part of like the beautiful storytelling in that beloved musical. And I also had the opportunity to be the understudy for Ursula And that was an incredible experience. I did have the chance to step into the role in performances. And fortunately, my mom and my sister got to fly in from New Jersey to see me perform as Ursula. But, I would say overall, the chance to be the understudy of any part was incredible. As an understudy or swing, you're fully trusted to step in a moment's notice and be trusted to know all the ins and outs of a part or parts without much practice time. As an understudy in swing, you are on the sidelines for most of the rehearsal process. And, you have to practice in your own time without getting to physically step into the part in the rehearsal space with the entire cast. So that's, a remarkable skill to, have the knowledge and the capability to step in, again, in a moment's notice, and not everyone can do it. And then truly, looking back at the Tuacahn experience, the people is, that aspect is the part that, I hold very near and dear to my heart. The company itself, cast, crew, creatives, good people, very caring and generous. And I think, walking away from that, you remember how people made you feel. And I remember just being in the Tuacahn environment, whether we're at the theater or even, off the premise of the theater, getting together and hanging out, you just felt a lot of care and comfort and love by everybody involved. So,
Yeah, and I mean, you you were amazing when you did step in for Ursula. You were amazing as Ariel, when you were her double, when the transformation happened. It was amazing to see all the different skill sets that you were able to show off in just 7 months. It was just absolutely amazing. And I was like, that's my roomie, like that's my roomie doing all this amazing things that she's doing on stage, to be able to sit there and witness it. And I just want to talk about the kind of person you are. Not only are you talented, but you have a good heart. And that was something that I took away from our time. And I would say the first time we met was pretty funny, because I was actually discussing this with another cast member, Nicole, because the first time I met her, I was late to coming in to check-in day for moving into our apartment. And so I knocked on her door, not even knowing that she was my understudy for Tiana. And that's our first introduction to each other. And then I was like, I have no idea who my roommate is. And Sherry wasn't picking up the phone. I'm sorry, Cherie wasn't picking up the phone. And so I was like, who do I get in touch with to get to my room?
yeah.
Eventually I found my room, but it was so late and I felt so bad because I know you were already asleep at that point. And I was like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm your roommate. I need to get in here. Otherwise, I'm going to be
Yeah.
sleeping out here in the hallway.
No, I did not leave you stranded. Yes.
No, you did not. But
Yeah.
yes, I'll get on to Tuacahn in a moment. I just want to start on your humble beginnings. When did you first fall in love with dance?
I fell in love with dance certainly at a young age. I grew up dancing with my sister. My parents, I believe, put the both of us in dance at the age of 4. And I'm the younger sister. And, my older sister, she started before me. And our parents, made it a ritual and tradition to expose us to as much dance and theater, as they could. We would take trips as often as we could into New York City. And we get to see shows. And the first show they took us to was 42nd Street. I must have been maybe 8 or 9 years old and fell in love with the dancing in 42nd Street, especially, at the very top of the show, the curtain rises and you see the tap dancing feet.
That's my favorite part. It's my
The
favorite
cast
part.
and just the chills. I still get the
Yeah.
chills thinking about that. And as a growing love over the years, I knew I wanted to keep doing dance as a hobby. And the more I kept attending dance classes, the more I just wanted to be there and be involved. And though as I was getting older, especially in my teenage years, I wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to dance forever. My sister was a huge inspiration and motivator. I always thought, of her as the better dancer. And I wanted to, be along with her and follow in her footsteps. And so definitely had that push and sense of a drive. Having my sister along with me in like my dance learning days. And then, eventually, especially in my years of high school, I knew for sure that, dance as well as theater was certainly, a love of mine. And I wanted to try pursuing it as a profession.
So Megan, we should give her credit.
Yeah.
Give her a
Yeah.
little shout out.
Yeah. Shout out to my sister Meg if you're listening or watching. Hi. Thanks for everything.
That is so sweet. I love to see that because one of my favorite actors is Felicia Rashad, and her sister is very well known choreographer and director and producer Debbie Allen. And Debbie Allen was inspired by her older sister Felicia Rashad to get into the entertainment industry. So I love that your sister was a sort of catapult for you. Sometimes siblings who do the same thing, you can build up rivalry, but I love that she just was an inspiration for you. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Hmm.
As far as dance goes, what is your favorite dance style?
If I had to pick, I really like a lot.
Mm.
Jazz is my favorite. I feel with jazz, I have a huge appreciation for the technique involved, but also the opportunities for, incorporating, your flair of personality and individuality, especially too, like when I take a traditional jazz class, I love the sense of like organization and the pace of the class, and the attention to detail. But there are, lots of opportunities for like adding your own pizzazz and, you know, throwing your own, attitude into it. And any moments where, as a taker of a jazz class, that I can incorporate, my own flair where I feel it's appropriate, I take full advantage. But yeah, jazz is, I would say, my favorite.
Wow. See, I was gonna think you was gonna say tap.
I like that. That's second place. Second place.
I feel like it's either jazz or tap with musical theater performers.
Yeah.
Like, which is the first that they love? They can do both. They don't mind doing both, but one they have to pick over the other, which is their number one. And I
Mhm.
definitely was gonna pick tap for you.
I like tap too. It's a
I'm
close,
learning
yeah.
something, Kelly.
Oh,
Because I'm
it's
thinking of
very
remember,
close. I do admire tap so much. And,
yeah.
certainly tap is a very skillful style, as they all are. But, you're making music with your feet essentially with tap. And I do love tap and choreographing tap as well. But yeah, for me, number one's jazz.
I love it. I was thinking also, when we did that benefit concert, you did tap to the Friends theme song. I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
brilliant, brilliant.
Oh, yeah. That
That's
was
like,
a fun
yeah.
show and beautiful showcase that, a number of us put together. And yeah, I thought
Mhm.
the tap was fun. And yeah, to the Friends theme song, you can't beat it.
No,
I'll
you
be there
cannot.
for you.
You really cannot. Um,
Uh-huh.
you also, in addition to being a great dancer professionally, you also teach dance, which I love to watch you put on as far as your Instagram content. I love watching that. What is it really like to be a dance teacher? Walk us through that journey of life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, truly, I love being a dance teacher. And in general, it's a gift to be a teacher. It's wild at times, especially in the classroom setting as a full time middle school teacher of performing arts. I get an average of 25 middle schoolers in a room at once. And
Mm,
there's obstacles, there are challenges. I find I wear many different hats and you know in addition to teaching content specific material involved with dance and theater, I'm also a lesson planner, problem solver, a guide, a technician, a shoulder to cry on. All right,
mm,
so there's so much involved, especially with younger students. My work involves primarily like young middle school kiddos, but I also teach at the adult level as well. in my time away from, school, my full time. I do enjoy teaching dance classes for the adult level. So there's a lot of challenges, but also some beautiful moments, especially with like my teaching practice now. I really find a lot of joy in sharing from my personal experiences with theater and dance and what I've taken from my performing career and bring that into the classroom space. A majority of students I work with have not had the opportunity to see a Broadway play. And I, hope to instill, the hope for students that yes, like in their everyday lives, like you can get involved with theater, whether it be go see a play in your hometown or, see if you could get involved in a community theater play. There's a lot of opportunities available for kids that, I hope I can give them that little extra push. And especially with, in general, in dance and educating students in dance and theater, the skills that they can take from whether taking a dance class or learning about theater, those are extremely transferable to real world experiences. For anything you want to do in life, you got to be a hard worker. You have to be a good listener and communicator. You have to be a good-hearted person and be kind to others. You also have to be coachable, and you have to be able to be willing to improve yourself and commit to that, and take feedback and apply it diligently. So many of those things that you can learn in a dance class or learn over time, whether it be being a part of a play or even being involved, say, in a production as a crew member. There's so much you could take from that and apply to any endeavor you set your mind to. So I understand that in teaching, it's not every day that you'll reach every student. And, I think over the years and my experience, I've learned that and, told myself and continue to tell myself that I'm doing my best. And if, a student grasps a concept or takes something from it, I feel victorious. But if they're not going to, at the end of the day, I hope to instill that, you still be respectful, you still be a good human being. And, maybe something that you grasp or learn, you can take that and translate it in a way that you see fit that aligns with what you want to achieve in your life. So.
And I just had like another question about that as far as teaching goes, as far
Yeah.
as being an inspiration to someone who might have struggled from the beginning of dance class to the gradual shift and progression that they have towards the end. How does that feel to witness that from your students?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's certainly a high, as far as if you teach something to a student and they grasp it and then they carry on with it, or, they just succeed. It's the most fulfilling and rewarding feeling, to have that power to be a role model or to, introduce a student or say a child to something brand new and that they can hone in and carry on with. It's really, really awesome. And I hope it's, for me, it's like feeding my soul and keeps me going, kind of keeps the fire running within me. So it's very exciting.
Over the past 2 years, I have built up a really big obsession for the Radio City Rockettes. Like, it's insane. I have been following them on all their social media. I even ran across this random Hallmark movie that they were in, and I noticed some of the same ladies that I had been watching on Instagram, and I just have fallen in love with them. I didn't grow up in New York, so, and I don't think it's just a thing for New Yorkers to fall in love with the Radio City Rockettes, but I feel like it's a fundamental thing that if you live in New York, the Rockettes are a part of the tradition of living out there. And me living in Ohio, I never felt that close to them until rooming with a Rockette.
Yeah.
And then later, like really watching them and observing how they work and how they rehearse and how diligent they are about just being precise about everything, and just the beautiful pictures that they paint with their bodies and all that stuff. So for me, what was it like to be a Radio City Rockette? You know, what was the audition like? You know, how many seasons did you perform and how many shows were you a part of? Because this is like an amazing thing that you've been a part of. Like when I found that out, I was like, wait, what?
Well, thank you. It's incredible compliment, and overall, being a Rockette was a fantastic experience. It was a goal of mine for a long time since I was younger. My sister had this huge, huge, huge dream to be a Rockette, and growing up as a family, we went to go see the Radio City Christmas Spectacular year after year. No matter, we knew the show backwards and forwards, but we kept going, and it was a joy for all of us. And my sister achieved the Rockettes, and when I saw her, achieve that goal of hers, I said, "Oh, maybe this is in the cards for me too, and maybe I could go for it and follow along and see what happens." And the training process to be a Rockette, if I want to achieve doing that, I really wanted to work for it. And I was, working like an Olympic athlete, up until the first day of rehearsals, in 2014. The year that I received an offer, it was for the touring production. And my year, we went to Omaha, Nebraska and Houston, Texas. So it was a great opportunity to take the show on the road, and for families and supporters, of the show who wanted to see the show but couldn't make it all the way to New York City, we brought the show to them. So it was a really beautiful opportunity and experience. As far as the process to become a Rockette, the audition process is pretty intense, as you can imagine. The open calls would always take place in New York City, but now I believe you may visit various cities around the country to audition. During my experience of auditioning, it'd be a 2-day process in New York City at Radio City Music Hall. On the very first day, you get there bright and early. Maybe the sun is rising as you are waiting in line, and the line is wrapped around the music hall. So hundreds and hundreds of dancers, attend the open call. Once you get into the building, you sign in, and there is more waiting, because everyone has to be signed in, and then they start calling groups. And then once your name is called into a group, they bring you into the room. And the first round is quick. You're in the room for a matter of minutes, and it's a quick combination consisting of a pirouette, a couple of high kicks, which the Rockettes are known for, and a pose. And then they go through, all the dancers line by line, and they make a cut. And then if you're asked to stay, you're brought back to the waiting room, and you have to wait all the way up until they see the very last auditionee. So a lot of waiting, a lot of hurry up and wait. I constantly remember, trying to keep my body warm and moving. Right. And it's hard when you're waiting, in a, crowded waiting room, you get tight, you get tense. So like you're constantly trying to keep active and warm throughout the whole process. Once they get through everybody, they bring all the dancers that were asked to stay back into the room for more dancing, and you'll stick with jazz dance. They will make a cut after that, and you're asked to put on your tap shoes to show off your tap skills. They make another cut after that, and then they teach a high kick variation. And then typically they'll make a cut after that. And then the last survivors in the room are asked to, survival of the fittest, asked to come back the next day for more dancing. So, you go home, you get rest, you do everything you got to do to prepare for the next day. And then when you're brought back in for the next day, you are expected to have all the material that you did the previous day memorized. So I found, like, over my years of auditioning, that the second day was the most grueling, because you have, this high expectation of knowing everything from the previous day, also learning new choreography, and you're also in the room with some new attendees. Because if you are a newer Rockette, maybe you've been with the show 3 years or less, you are asked to re-audition for your spot on the line. So there's, more competition, and, you're constantly proving yourself. There is a cut usually made on day 2. And then, the final group of dancers that are in the room get the notice that they are now in consideration for an offer to be a Rockette. So it's wild just to think of just how many hundreds and hundreds of dancers begin in the process, and then it's whittled down to a group of maybe 25.
25.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
And
Wow.
so you're on a high of like, oh my God, I made it to the end. You feel like, this is just a battlefield. And they have you sign some documentation, like, a consent. And I remember, there's the top portion of the form you keep and you take home, the bottom you turn in. And I saved the 4 copies of the top portion of the form, and I plastered them on my bedroom wall,
That's
where I
right.
grew up. And so, yeah, I auditioned and made it all the way through 4 times. And it was audition number 4 that I got the call the following afternoon that I was being asked to be a Rockette for that season. I was, at the time of the call, I was in transit from New Jersey to New York. I was commuting from home to New York City the next day. And when I noticed my phone buzzing with, reading the area code New York, I knew this was the call, and I was, of course, freaking out, excited, but also nervous that maybe the call wouldn't go through because I was underground. I was coming off the train. So here I am just thinking of all the possibilities. And then when I, heard the words on the other side of the, other end of the phone to say, we're offering you a position as a Radio City Rockette, my heart was pounding out of its chest and hyperventilating. Hopefully I made sense to accept the offer, and then I'm like rushing up, the stairs up Penn Station in New York City, so I can get, above ground and like gather my thoughts, like take a couple deep breaths and, call my mom with the good news.
That's like a typical like New York movie moment.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it could have definitely been all, in a big movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure they're used to people having all kinds of weird reactions when they get that call. So
Um, oh my goodness. Yeah. My
that is
story is
amazing.
one of the wild few, or many wild stories, but truly, what a remarkable experience. It was the hardest performing job of my life. It was my first dance job.
Mm.
Um, I took it quite seriously. And, upon arrival for first week of rehearsals, the first couple of days as a new Rockette, you are required to do what's called boot camp. And yeah, they call it boot camp. And you're in the room with the newbie Rockettes, as well as the director of the show and the dance captains. And you learn all the in unison choreography in the first 3 days. And the pressure's on, you're trying to make a good impression. But however, you feel part of a team in that, you're with other new Rockettes and we're all going through the same process. Um, Uniquely, in my case, those first 3 days were like a whirlwind. In transit, my luggage got lost because they flew us from our hometown to where we were rehearsing. We were rehearsing for the tour. I had no dance clothes, no dance shoes. Thankfully, my fellow Rockette friends lended me dance clothes, and I was able to lend out shoes from the company. So I just, when you don't have your personal belongings, you feel out of sorts. So like I'm
Exactly.
learning all this new material. I'm like freaking out and just not feeling myself. So it was tough. It was challenging, but we made it through. And then within like that next week of rehearsals, the whole cast is brought in to learn the show and block through the show all together. And yeah, there were amazing days and really tough days. There were days where throughout the rehearsal process and, the run of the show, like I felt really, really good and I felt really strong. I felt exhilarated and just, you know, completely thrilled to be there. But then there were times where like I wasn't feeling great. I was tired, I was hurting. I was sad and I was homesick. There are a lot of, a mix of emotions throughout the whole run. But I can say now, looking back, this is 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years that I performed in the show from my first season. I'm proud that I did it and I'm proud that I made it through. It's not fit for everybody. But I feel like as a Rockette rookie, like I had a strong season. And, I learned through doing the Rockettes just the importance of being organized and being attentive to detail and, taking feedback respectfully and applying that feedback, diligently, being a good sport and being a good team player, and a lot of those things, I really was able to carry throughout the projects that I would do following my season as a Rockette. And the Rockettes just set the tone for like how I approached work and, how I acted, whether around others in like a theater space or just how I carried out my own responsibilities and duties as an actor, part of a show.
I can attest to that. Truly, you are a beast. You are.
Yeah.
I just listening to you, I'm like, wow, that 25 dancers from hundreds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I all the
maybe
things that you were.
thousands, maybe thousands. I might be,
Wow.
underestimating. It was cool too because over the auditions, they really wanted to hype, the public up. It's such a
Right.
big time and, the theater dance industry, during the time of Rockette auditions, and a lot of news channels would like feature, glimpses of the auditions. And, I remember a camera people would go around and, ask for like moments, interviews or just say like, how are you feeling right now? And, you just wanted to be positive, but yet you were in the face of just, like approaching this crazy process of auditions. But truly, looking back, every part of it, I'm proud of, and I'm happy I did it, and I'm happy that I made it through. Because it's, again, the work, it's, you don't really get a taste of what it's like until you're actually in it and doing it. And throughout the run, I grew to really appreciate like the friendships that I made. You're working with, our cast was 18 Rockettes total in the line. And I, developed a strong friendship with especially like the ladies next to me in the kick lines. And, if one of us was having a bad day, you have each other's shoulder to cry on and somebody to turn to. Thankfully, the two gals that were next to me, they've been Rockettes for several years. So, if I had a question or I needed, some advice, they were really kind to share with me like their insight, and help me out.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to do a kick line one day. That seems so fun and scary at the same time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Whether
Uh-huh.
it's the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders or the Radio City Rockets, I'm
Yeah.
like, a kick line would be so fun as long as it's done safely and
Yeah.
right.
Well, yeah, both, Rockettes and Dallas Cowboys, like, the
Yeah.
technique and the, it's intense.
Yeah, I love that you keep in touch with some of the girls. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I would, yeah, I mean, I would hope you would hold on to that sisterhood, because yeah, it's a once in a lifetime thing that not, like you said, not everybody gets to experience this. What has been your worst audition ever? Whether it be singing, dancing, musical theater, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Because we all have had one.
Oh my goodness. I can't really pinpoint, like a time or an audition where like that was like labeled as the worst. I've definitely had auditions where, I came out of it just like knowing in my gut that, like I didn't do my best. And, I constantly have like the ritual pep talks of like, all right, there's going to be another one, you know. I remember specifically in an audition, I had a mishap where, you know, I always like hold a hair tie like on my wrist, and the hair tie broke right like when we were walking in, and you know, sometimes, you know, if the hair is getting in my face and you know there's sweat and stuff, the hair's sticking, it's not a cute look. So I try to pull my hair back, and yeah, the hair tie breaks, and you know, it was one of those calls, you know, a dance call where the dancing is wicked wild and active and sweat is just everywhere. And, you know, I felt just like my hair was sticking to me. And I'm not sure if that was the most successful audition, you know. I mean, I guess I would have remembered if it was, but you know, I think overall, you know, in the realm of the auditions, trying to have a strong face and just know that like one specific call or one specific audition does not determine, you know, whether I'm successful or worthy of getting an opportunity. You know, it's all part of the process. Like, you know, the greats of our time, you know, could definitely share all about, you know, the worst audition that, you know, they just tanked or they didn't do their best or they bombed it. And we all have that. We are all human, you know, and we're all going through it. So
Exactly. Well said, Kelly. So we're going to talk a little bit about Tuacahn since we've already touched on it. For me, I remember a distinct memory of just you in the dragon's head.
yes, the dragon's head. There were so many, I feel there were a lot of different versions of that moment.
Yes, in the
You know, it was a
Mulan
lot of
moment.
trial
Yes.
and error in the rehearsal space. And yeah, the dragon head, you know.
And I wanted to talk about your resilience because it was a lot of this is going to happen. No, it's not. This is about to happen. Nat, scratch that. So
Yep.
you were so just present and very professional about all the ever changes. It was forever changing all the time,
Yeah.
specifically in that number. Um, did you stay in the Dragon's Head or did that just get completely swapped? I can't remember
Yeah,
anymore.
I feel it was changed or
Okay.
modified, adjusted over
Yeah.
time throughout the
I
run.
remember, yeah, I remember I was like, I was in that number and then I wasn't. And I
Yeah.
was happy with not being in the number because I got to watch, you know, the
Yeah.
Mulan scene completely. And I loved that was one of my favorite
Uh-huh.
parts of When You Wish. But I just remember that specifically you in the Dragon's Head. And I love that you mentioned Dancing on the Rock earlier because I totally forgot that you were doing that.
Yeah, that's certainly like a vivid memory. And I just, you know, it was a hike. It was a hike to get back there. And
Mhm.
I remember, you know, our directors, I think, suggested the idea. And I don't know what, you know, made me say, like, I'll do it. You know, like I was head first for just, you know, being adventurous. And
Yeah.
as I was saying earlier, like, what other time can you get a chance to, you know, dance and sing
In a
on a
cave.
rock? Like, you
Yeah.
know, in nature, you know,
Mhm.
and it's so like untraditional, but I thought it was so awesome. So
Yeah.
I was head first. I'm like, I'll do it. I'm like trudging up the, you know, the mountainous, you know, ground for the beginning at the top of the show. And, you know, I just thought it was super cool.
Yeah, I right when you said that, I was like, "That's right." She used to leave earlier than everybody else to
Yep.
get in position.
Yep.
I was always like towards the end of when it was getting closer and closer, like, okay, 5 minutes, and I'd be like, okay, I'm still kind of getting ready, but I still
Uh-huh.
had enough time
Oh,
because I
I was
was in the
back
back.
there.
Yeah, I was in the back, but I wasn't all the way in the back like you.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, I heard the music. You know, I heard,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the cue for, you know, the opening of the number. But yeah, I was back there for a while. I was hunched down.
Wilkie Ferguson, he also was in the back, but like again, you were the farthest back.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you were. You take the award for that. And
Yeah.
another thing that a lot of people, I think, noticed as a cast about you was that you do not mark at all, which I love because a lot of teachers in my at my school that I went to they never liked marking. They were like, go full out. And I do understand why people mark, because you know you're conserving your energy. How many times are you going to do this number in a day? You might do it so many times that your body breaks down, and you this is just rehearsal. Like, we have to prep for the actual performance. So I understand why people mark. But people called you, I think it was full out Kelly, something like that. Everybody was like, Kelly does not mark. She does it full out. And I later thought about it. I was like, maybe that's because of her days at Radio City Rockettes, because they
Yeah.
probably are no nonsense, no marking, you know?
Oh man. Yeah.
Because
I
in the
mean,
jungle book scene, the jungle book section,
oh yeah.
you were
Yep.
going
That's the
hard.
chimp. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I really
Mhm.
committed to that. That was just so much fun, bouncing around, bopping around like a chimp. Um, and I made it my own, and I felt
Mhm.
goofy, but I hope to, stay true to, the intention of the number and the choreography, and not let, my approach like take away from, the incredible choreography set. But I had fun, and I think that's really what it is about. When you can put your taste or your flair like into a character, that it's so fulfilling. And that's the beauty with theater. You can be individual, and you can make choices that are celebrated, that they feel like your own, and you're interpreting it and inventing, what you feel for a certain character when you're, performing as a specific part. And yeah, that's what I really enjoyed about all the theater opportunities, doing different stage musicals, is just that liberty and freedom just to do what you want to do. Of course, not pull away from the artistic vision. But yeah, just put your own spin on it, and
That's right.
be authentic.
So you did 4 shows with Tuacahn that season.
Yeah.
Because you went all the way into winter time,
Yeah.
with their Christmas show with Elf. So out of the 4 shows, which one was your favorite? I know it's
Mm.
hard.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna say Disney's When You Wish. Yeah,
Okay.
it was just nonstop. I feel
Mhm.
like, as much as it felt like a marathon on the stage, like backstage, it was a marathon too. The quick changes, and um, you know, simply getting from one side of the stage to the other, because at Tuacahn, the upstage area is exposed. So like, you
Mhm.
don't have a curtain, or a place to cross backstage. You have to go down the steps and run, or safely
Yeah.
power walk
And for those
to.
who don't know, it's like When You Wish was a musical review. So there
Yep.
was really no dialogue in between. There were musical numbers back to back to back. And so, like she was saying, it's a lot of marathon on stage and backstage, because
Mhm.
there's nothing
Yes.
in there's no interludes really that long enough for a real
Yeah.
long costume change.
Yep. Costume changes, multiple characters. The beauty of
Yes.
the show, was think about all of your favorite Disney movies,
Hmm.
musicals combined into one staged production. And you're
Yes.
getting glimpses and tastes of all these, beautiful Disney stories and tales. And we were all a part of telling that story. Um, and yeah, all the parts, from the chimp, and then the gorilla for the Tarzan scene, and all the little small moments, even, a
Don't
moment
forget
I.
Moana.
Yes! Oh,
I
Moana.
loved watching you on the side of
Moana.
Moana.
Uh-huh, yes.
That
Yep,
was
yep.
so cute.
I had a moment as a maid in Beauty and the Beast, and as the genie, and then, Step in Time as a chimney sweep, just what a ride that was. So yeah, I just love the you know, numerous, you know, character moments and stage time opportunities and When You Wish. So I would say that was my favorite out of all of them.
And what's your favorite show you have ever started?
Oh man, this
I
is tricky
know.
too. Um, I would say one that's really popping in my head is a show I got to do on a cruise ship. with Norwegian Cruise Line. The year before the Tuacahn opportunity presented itself, I worked on the Norwegian Joy with Norwegian Cruise Line in 2018. And one show that we did was called Paradis. The show was inspired by the Parisian culture. So, incorporated singing, acting, and dancing. And it also featured like popular hit songs like Some Like It Hot, Can Can, and La Vie en Rose. And when I was doing that show, I had some feature parts, lots of singing and dancing feature moments. I also served as an understudy for a main role in the Can Can routine. And I also was a swing for all the female showgirls in the opening number and the closing number. So I was a busy gal doing that show. And but yeah, specifically the Can Can, I did get put into the lead part that I was understudying multiple times throughout our time on the ship. But that number overall was a party, so many tricks because, Can Can, we had the skirts and we had men also in the number where there was partnering tricks and we did lots of kick lines and acrobatics and jump splits, So I had a ball, in that show. And yeah, the opportunities, that I was featured were wonderful, but truly the show itself was exciting. And the people I was working with at the time were lovely. And the traveling aspect of being on a cruise ship was just really miraculous. It was an experience that I would have never imagined for myself. Like I would have never pictured myself visiting China and Japan and that aspect and diving into like Japanese culture and the cuisine and that was just really remarkable. So I would say that was like my favorite show experience or one that's really popping up in my head.
So do you have any career lows with all the different variety of different things that you've been able to do in your career thus far?
Mm-hmm. I would say, a low that, I'm sure a lot of artists can resonate with, as well as some of your listeners, is just the time of the pandemic, that was just a very uncertain time for everybody, no matter what kind of industry or field you were involved in. And I felt, very lost, especially when the industry was shut down. I questioned myself a lot. I was even, questioning and asking myself, why didn't I choose a career, where I wasn't, worried about being steady and losing work or, having this miserable downtime. And even not, comparing myself to others, others around me did have the ability to work remotely and keep, a steady income. And I felt just inadequate, in comparison. So, in the midst of that, we were shut down and then we transitioned into social distancing. I kept a lot of part-time, non-performing jobs. And, I did what I could. I kept busy. I wanted to, stay productive. However, I knew like the part-time small jobs I was doing just wasn't feeding my soul. And, I had to face my thoughts head on with the idea, am I going to feel stuck still and stay in the state, like being negative on myself? Or am I going to, try to turn this around and make it productive and stay positive and do what I can to, keep the momentum going? So, over that time and that really tough period, as we were all going through, I tried to look for ways to use my credentials and stay involved and still be active, within dance and theater. I vouched for myself a lot. I offered, teaching opportunities, one-on-one and, through virtual, experiences. And I, did a lot of Googling with how I could, use my talents and my expertise and, maybe use it in different modes of work. And I learned through lots of Googling, as well as an uncle of mine who's a former, principal, that with your college degree, you could get certified to teach, in your state. So I went through that process and I applied with all my dance college credentials to apply for an eligibility to teach certificate in the state of New Jersey. And many, many months later, I finalized employment. I bounced around schools and I was still unsteady. I didn't really, not that I didn't know what I was doing, but like I wasn't 100% confident and sure, and purposeful in my choices and the transition. And over time too, I learned the ropes, and I'm still learning the ropes. And it's been a journey, but I would say just in the last couple of years, from having been quite consistent as a performer on stage to, fast forward a couple years and now as a full-time teacher, within the performing arts, I wouldn't, necessarily say like that was a major low or a setback in my career. It's what I do now is really added to my experiences. And I definitely see that, in a way as a blessing in disguise. I feel just the kind of highs and lows in my career, has happened for me and has taught me to be resilient and be strong in the face of really tough circumstances. And it's definitely just proved to me that like, I can consider myself one of the brave ones willing to go for it, and what I do now is a little bit different from what I was doing, prior, having spent, time on stage in the spotlights. But in a way, I feel so much of what I was doing, pre-pandemic and, as a full-time performing artist, like I use so many of those skills today in my work. And I'm really proud from, where I came from and what I do now. It really has paved the way for opportunities that I've been given here and now.
You should absolutely feel proud, and it's a beautiful thing you just said. I love that perspective because I think a lot of times in our industry, we look down on people who decide to take the teacher route. It's like you said, it's like a downgrade in some of our minds, and I think a lot of us think that way when we're in our 20s, and because we have yet to live life.
Yeah.
Reality hasn't set in, like you said. Sometimes you got to get a reality check. That sometimes you might have to step into the acting teacher role. It doesn't mean that you give up completely on your dream, but that's just a new direction that you're headed right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a chance to tell your younger self something that you know now, what would you tell her?
I would tell my younger self that it's okay if goals change. I think I can be a little bit hard on myself when I reflect, with some goals that I set for myself at a younger age. And I know, there's goals that I didn't meet. It doesn't determine my worth and my success. Um, just because I didn't achieve certain goals that I made for myself maybe 5, 10 plus years ago, it doesn't mean that like, I'm a failure or that I called it quits. I find just as we're living, we are evolving, we're living and learning and changing and growing as we, carry on in life. And it is okay if, goals change. And not to be so hard on yourself for, making any adjustments or, taking any left or right turns or pivots. So yeah, I think that's what I would tell myself is that it's okay if goals change, and just, to trust the process, because I think we're easy to say, oh, why is this happening to me? Or, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, things happen for you and they prepare you. You know, I think a lot of the tough moments I've had both on stage and off, like, you know, really helped pave the way for what I do now and the kinds of tasks I'm, you know, required to, you know, approach now in my work. So yeah, I think that's what I would tell my younger self. It's okay if goals change. Trust the process and not be hard on yourself.
Hmm. One thing I noticed when I was your roommate is that you are very much involved in fitness and taking care of yourself, and exercise is important to you. Like, you would get up really early in the morning and go to Theory, was it Orange Theory or something like that? And I was like, I would occasionally work out, like I would do maybe some slim aerobics things, but I was like, Kelly is dedicated. And I love that about, just seeing that about you, because it actually inspired me to change up my fitness life, and I'm always ever changing, figuring out different things that work for me, like for me, Zumba and dancing, that's stuff that gets me excited about working out. But now I'm actually doing, the fit bands and actually learning how to lift weights and stuff like that. What does fitness and exercise mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy for you on your, you know, fitness and wellness journey. And, you know, I find for me, you know, my fitness routine and moving my body is therapy. You know, movement truly is medicine, the way I see it. And I always, you know, I'm reminding myself that it is a privilege to move your body. And
Mhm.
that's like so great that, you know, we have the capability to do that and get out of bed and make a move, even if it's simply a walk or, you know, run a little jog around the block. You know, I find, you know, movement, you know, as a ritual. I try to move my body in any way. You know, every day. I mean, there's days where I don't want to exert effort, you know, and I give myself the rest days when I need. And I need the rest days because if, you know, if I don't give myself a reset day, you know, a rest, I get burnt out and, you know, I'm just not myself. Whereas, yeah, the movement, you know, I really enjoy running and, you know, running for me, it helps not just, you know, stay fit physically, but for my mental, emotional health and my mental state, like I release stress, you know, I focus on me and, you know, that my body, my health, my strength, those are priorities that I want to, you know, lead with and keep in mind always. And also, you know, the side of, you know, fitness and it could really enhance, you know, your social experience. For
Mm.
example, you know, within the last year and a half, I moved to a new area, and one of the first things that I looked into was joining a running club. And it's a community of adults of all ages, and we meet weekly, a couple times a week even, for group runs. And it's a
Wow.
fun way to get to know people, people from all walks of life, you know, all ages, all levels. Some people run, some people walk, some people are training for big races, and others are just doing it for fun or trying something new. And then post run or event, we have a little social hangout. You know, we catch up, and I've developed some great friends from that too. So it really lifts my spirits, not just the physical aspect of the exercise and fitness, but, you know, social, you know, community building you can engage in. And you know, it's fitness and exercise, moving is a very big part of my life, and I hope to stay moving and active, and also not look at it as a punishment, you know, or like, oh, like I just ate, you know, two donuts for breakfast, now I got to run or walk, you know. You know, as I have gotten older, and you know, I don't look at the fitness and the exercise as like a punishment for, you know, whether, you know, not following a diet or, you know, something like that. As it circles back, you know, when I mentioned it, you know, it's a gift to move and a privilege, and you know, I want to stay in tune with that and use that as my motivator. not necessarily, oh, I have to do this because, I just ate a burrito and chips and guac for dinner and now I feel gross. Like, it's the moving my body is because I want to, and I'm going to feel good before I do it, during, well, hopefully, and after, that sense of accomplishment. Yeah.
Well, Kelly, we've come to the end of the interview, and I have one last question for you. It's a doozy. It's everyone's favorite.
Yeah.
Do you like yourself?
The simple answer is yes, and I do like myself. I love myself truly. Life is tough, as we all know, though. I feel in this world, a major influence is external validation. And, I am always at work to remind myself and center myself on like my own expectations for myself and try not to let, maybe what I think others think of me get involved. Because at the end of the day, we all have our own goals. We all have our own values and priorities to center on. And, Joe Schmo and, Sally Sue, whoever is not worried about, what Kelly is, doing right in this moment right now. They have their own lives to live. So yeah, I find a lot of power in just the way you speak to yourself and how you see yourself. I'm constantly, working to improve myself, even if it's just, the daily affirmations that I repeat, at various times of the day, for myself to keep me motivated and, to be my own cheerleader. And I'm not ashamed of that. I'm also not ashamed to say, like, I'm a big fan of, say reading books for like self-improvement and personal growth. And, I keep a notes app on my iPhone with just tidbits of advice and guidance, if I'm feeling down or if I get in a funk and I need like a pep talk. And truly, yeah, the way we speak to ourselves, there's a lot of power in that. If you're going to talk badly to yourself, you're going to feel bad. And, there needs to be some convincing, to tell yourself that you are worthy and that, you love yourself, and, if I want to live my best life, like this is the one life I get, so, I better be kind to myself and give myself grace. And, if I need, to reset and refocus my energy, like I want to give myself the freedom and the space to do that. Certainly want to keep at giving myself, the attention, the love that, I deserve. And as we all do, we are all worthy of doing great things and living our best life, and how we talk to ourselves, how we see ourselves really, really matters. So.
Absolutely. I just want to thank you, Kelly, for joining me today. And I want to thank everyone who's sitting here watching this. I will see you next time on About That Life. Bye.
Yes, thank you for having me.